I know you loaded this video to get some information about wills and living wills. Let me just first tell you that I'm not a lawyer. I do not offer any financial advice. I'm actually an insurance agent, a life insurance agent, and I certainly can help people in that area. But I know a lot about wills and living trust. And I just wanted to spend a few moments to share that information with you because I run across people all the time that basically have the question of like, what is a living will and what's the difference between that and a will or a living trust? So I'll talk about a living will, a standard will, and a living trust. And just a little hint, I'm going to save the best for last. So let's start with a living will. What the heck is a living will? So typically, people use a living will to identify and to document their final wishes when it comes to catastrophic situations where they end up on life support. They potentially had a stroke and they want to tell their loved ones exactly what they want to happen if they get into that situation where they can no longer verbalize what they actually want to happen. So typically people go to a lawyer and they create a living will. Now I will tell you, a living will with a lawyer typically results in a boilerplate type living will. So they pull out of their file cabinet a standard living will, and it has a lot of different information in it related to different situations that you could find yourself in. To give you an example, let's say that you're in a major car accident and you end up brain dead on a feeding tube. A boilerplate living will identify very specifically and what the final wishes would be for you. So in many cases it would say something like, if two attending doctors agree that there's no chance of recovery, then your final wish is to not be resuscitated and not to have any feeding or nutrition of any type. So you got to be careful when you actually sit down with a lawyer that you understand exactly what's in the living will, because when you sign a living will, there are many clauses in there related to different situations that people can end up with. You could have a massive heart attack and basically not have the ability to talk any longer, but you mentally you may be okay. So you need to make sure that you know what is in the living will that you are signing, because once you sign that living will, that's it. Your loved ones have no say as to what will happen if you end up in any one of these conditions. So if you do use a lawyer, make sure that you read the living will and you understand and agree with the content of the living will. Now, I will tell you, you do not need to have a living will, or you do not need to have a lawyer So I will tell you, you do not need to have a lawyer involved to create a living will. In almost every state in the country, all you need to do is to have a written document that states your final wishes in regards to these situations. And as long as you sign it and date it and get it notarized, that's an official living will. Now, in many states, you do also need to have a witness. Some states require 2 witnesses, but your notary would help you with that. So, you can pull out a tablet paper and with freehand, you don't even need to have it typed, is write out your living will. Make sure that you address everything that you want to address, because if you don't include things in your living will that actually happen, it's like you just don't even have a living will. So you can generalize many of the topics, but make sure that you cover as many topics as you can in your living will, sign and date it, take it to a notary, and you're done. Of course, you need to make sure that you safe keep that document and give it to your loved ones. And actually, at the end of this video, I'm going to explain an online service to you that really makes it very, very easy for you to do that. Again, no lawyers involved, very inexpensive solution to that. So that's a living will. So how does that differ from a standard will? So a standard will is basically addressing assets. What do you have? What do you own of value that you want to pass on to other people, or possibly to charitable organizations? I'll give you an example. Let's say you have a house that's paid for, and you want to pass that on to your daughter, or maybe you want to pass that on to your brother, or maybe you want to split it between 2 or 3 people. In a will, what you typically do is you list all of your assets and you identify who will receive those assets. And of course, you should be very specific in the names and contact information for those people, so that, when you do pass, it's very easy to find those people and to proceed with your wishes. And again, a will, you can go to a lawyer, get a lawyer involved, which a lot of people do, for a few $100s, and they'll create an official document that is identified as your will, and you'll basically sign and date it, and it will be witnessed and notarized and everything. So, but that being said, just as in the case of a living will, you do not need a lawyer. Now, the reason I say that is the only thing the lawyer is doing is he's pulling out a boilerplate will, and he's putting into that document what you want put in that document. Now, he may have some recommendations on, the different assets that you have, some things that you may not even think about, maybe an old car that you have that's not of much value, but might only be worth a couple $1,000s, but that needs to go somewhere, so you can donate that to a charity, or give it to whoever you want to give it to. So it's very critical that whether you go to a lawyer or you do it on your own, make sure that you make a list of every asset that you have that has significant value, like more than $1,000, and be very specific on who you want those assets to go to. Now, since you're making a will when you're alive, there's a good chance that that will won't be executed for many, many, many years in the future. Let's say 20, 30 years. And the assets that you have 20, 30 years from now likely will be very different than the assets you have right now. So keep that in mind, that when you do put together your will, be general in that you want to say that all of your assets that have not been identified very specifically in this document, any other assets are to be distributed to the following people or the following charities. So just keep that in mind. Again, don't need a lawyer. Lawyer is not going to solve your problem. Your problem is you need to take inventory of what you have and who you want to give it to. That's the major task. And, that you just can't do that in a 10 or 15 minute sit down with a lawyer. You need to spend some time and think about it and then document it. And you don't have to be a great writer. Put it in your own words. Doesn't have to be typed. It can be handwritten. And again, take it to a notary, date it, sign it, get the notary to notarize it, and witness the document as needed. That's all there is to it. So that pretty much takes care of a living will and a will. As I said before, I'm saving the best to last, and that's a living trust. Now, a lot of people shy away from a living trust because they think that you have to be rich to have a living trust. And there's absolutely no truth to that. Anyone can get a living trust. So what's the difference between a living trust and a will? Well, the first and the biggest difference is a will, whether you're talking about a living will or a standard will, always goes through probate. Now, if you don't know what probate is, the easiest way to explain that is that's where lawyers make their money. So whenever an asset is distributed to someone else, probate is a status or a period of time where anyone that feels that they have right to that asset has the ability to basically raise their hand and say, hey, I want that asset. And then lawyers get involved, lawyers on both sides, a lawyer for your estate and a lawyer for whoever created your will, and the lawyer of the person that's making the claim against your asset. So it's a very costly stage of distributing your assets that come out of a will or a living will. The problem is you want to avoid that at all costs. You want to minimize the amount of, or the percentage that lawyers take as a result of dealing with your will or your living will, right? And the way to do that is with a living trust. A living trust does not require probate. So most lawyers aren't going to tell you that. Most lawyers make their living on probate, and a living trust is kind of off their radar because they know that they're pretty much, they're not going to get a big piece of the pie. Now, there are costs associated with a living trust, but believe me, it's far less expensive to have your assets distributed via a living trust. Now, you do need to have a lawyer, unfortunately, or a company that deals with living trusts. They need to manage your living trust, but it's a relatively inexpensive situation. You don't need to be a millionaire. In fact, you can actually start a living trust with basically no money. I mean, there'll be some fees to set it up and to assign a management company. But let me give you an idea of what a lot of people do these days, and especially people that want to leave a legacy. If you're the type of person that would like to leave a legacy for your loved ones, let's say your grandkids or great grandkids, you want them to remember you and you want to take care of them in the future, and maybe shape their future, you do that with a living trust. Now, let me maybe give you a little example of that. Let's say that you wanted all of your grandkids to go to higher education and to get a college degree, or get a bachelor's degree or something like that. Obviously, you can't afford to pay for that, but that's your wish. And that's your legacy, is to make sure that each of your grandkids is college educated. Yeah, I mean, it could be anything. It could be religious in nature. It could be travel in nature. You may want your grandkids to travel every year. Some people include that in their living trust. In other words, they will give each of their grandchildren a certain number of dollars, but those dollars need to be used to travel to a foreign country. A lot of people feel as though there's a lot of residual benefits associated with international travel and being well schooled from an international perspective. So how do you do that? I mean, that sounds like you need like a lot of money, right? Well, of course, if you have a lot of money, it's very easy to do that. You simply go to a company that will manage a living trust for you, and you put together your living trust and your wishes and what to do with the money that you leave when you pass away, in distributing it to your loved ones, or maybe even to a charity. So let's talk about the majority of people that don't have a lot of money, but they do want to leave a legacy, and to do this with a living trust. So how do they do that? They do that with a large life insurance policy. So anyone can go out and get $1 million life insurance policy, a $200,000 life insurance policy, any amount you want, $5 million, anything that you can afford from a monthly basis to pay for, regardless of your age. Regardless, whether you're 35 years old or 75 years old, you can get a very large life insurance policy. Now, of course, you pay the monthly premiums to have that policy, and you want to make sure that you can afford those monthly premiums. But the benefit is that when you do pass away, that life insurance policy, your beneficiary for that policy would be your living trust. So you might open your living trust with $100, which is really nothing, right? But when you pass away, your $1 million life insurance policy will fund the living trust. So now all of a sudden your living trust has $1 million when you pass away, regardless of when or why or how you pass away. So that's how people fund a living trust if you don't have a lot of money right now. So I want you to, do some research on your own related to a living trust. But I can tell you for sure that if you do a will or a living will, your assets are going to go through probate, and you're going to lose a certain percentage of your assets when you do that. You totally eliminate probate with a living trust. About the last thing I wanted to talk about was at the start of the video, I had mentioned that there's an online service that is a perfect solution for all of this. So the name of the online service is Living Will Messages. 3 words, Living Will Messages. Put those 3 words together, no spaces, .com. So you go to that website, and the beauty of that website is you can do a living will, you can do a will, but the real beauty of that website is you can create messages that are sent to maybe your living trust management company upon your death, sent to your children, sent to your loved ones, sent to your coworkers, sent to anyone you want. And those messages are not delivered until after you pass away or become incapacitated. So let's say you have a stroke and you're no longer able to function at all, then those messages are delivered at that time. So in those messages, you can put anything you want in those messages. It could be instructions on how to log on to your computer. It could be secrets related to, where you may have hidden your coin collection. It could be love letters that you're sending to people. It could be messages to your coworkers to tell them, how to continue doing your work at work. Could be anything you want. But and the nice thing is, every one of those messages you have the ability of simply printing out, and at the bottom there's a place for you to sign and to take to a notary and get it notarized, and it becomes a legal document once you do that. So livingwillmessages.com, perfect solution, very inexpensive. Last time I looked, it was like $29 a year, and it's the way to go. So take a look at that, and make sure you please like this video, subscribe to the channel, so when I drop more videos, you'll get them first. So I appreciate your time, and have a wonderful day.